Welcome to This Is How We Heal with naturopath, herbalist, and author Anthea Koulouros. With over 3 decades of clinical experience guiding thousands on their healing journeys, Anthea invites you into honest, heartfelt conversations about what really gets in the way of health and healing and what gently brings us back to ourselves. If you're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, overwhelmed by wellness noise, or just yearning to feel like yourself again, you're in the right place. This podcast is for anyone feeling burnt out, lost in a sea of symptoms, or simply longing for a deeper connection to their health, their body, and their truth.
Hello and welcome to This Is How We Heal. I'm Anthea Koulouros, naturopath, and someone who has spent a great deal of time sitting with both her patients and herself in the harder corners of life. Wherever you are right now, walking, resting, driving, cooking, or simply pausing for a breath in your day, I am genuinely glad that you're here. This podcast is a space where we slow things down, where we look at health, healing, and life with curiosity rather than certainty. Today, I want to share something I've been writing about in a book I'm working on, and the subject is rest. Most of us are not good at rest, and I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean it as an observation, one that I've made in over 30 years of clinical practice, and one that I've had to sit with in my own life repeatedly, sometimes uncomfortably. We live in a culture that has made a virtue out of busyness, where the first thing we say when someone asks us how we are is busy. Where doing nothing feels at best indulgent, and at worst like we're not achieving or succeeding. Rest has been reframed as laziness, and we've absorbed that idea so deeply that even when we do stop, even when we sit down or lie down or close our eyes, there is often a low hum of guilt running beneath it. A voice that says, you should be doing something. But here's what I want to offer today. Rest is not the absence of doing. Rest is biologically a necessity. It is a healing practice. And for many people, learning to rest, truly rest, is one of the most radical and courageous things they will ever do. We tend to collapse rest into one thing. We think sleep, or we think sitting on the couch watching television. And while sleep is, of course, foundational, we will come back to that, true rest is far more textured than that. Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, a physician and researcher, has written beautifully about this. She identifies 7 distinct types of rest, and I find this framework clinically and personally useful as a way of asking which of these am I actually getting and which am I starving for. There is physical rest, which is the obvious one. Sleep, yes, but also just stillness. That restorative movement or napping without apology. There is mental rest, the quieting of the relentless narration in our minds, the internal monologue that never quite stops, the planning, the replanning, the rehearsing of conversations. Many people who sleep 8 hours still wake exhausted because their minds have never truly been given the permission to go quiet during the day. There is sensory rest, the relief from the constant stimulation of screens, noise, notifications, artificial lights, and artificial smells. Our nervous systems were simply not designed for the volume of input we are now exposed to every single day. And creative rest, the replenishment that comes from beauty, from nature, from art, from the experience of wonder and awe. This is the rest that fills the well. And there is emotional rest, and this one is perhaps the most underestimated. The capacity to stop performing, to stop managing how you appear to others, to be seen without having to explain yourself. Many people, particularly those who spend their lives caring for others, whether they're parents, practitioners, or partners, are chronically deprived of emotional rest. They give and give and give and give, and they do not know how to receive. There is social rest, the discernment between relationships that drain and relationships that restore. Not all connection is restorative. Some social environments require a level of vigilance, of impression management that is genuinely depleting. Social rest is known which people you can exhale around. And finally, there is spiritual rest, the deep need to feel that your life has meaning, that you belong to something larger than yourself, that you are not just producing and consuming, but participating in something real. Most of us are resting in one or two of these, usually the most visible, obvious ones, but quietly starving in the others. Now, let me bring this into the body because this is where I live as a clinician and this is where it becomes undeniable. Rest is not a passive act. Biologically, rest is an active state. It is when the body does some of its most important work. When we rest, we genuinely downshift into what the nervous system calls the parasympathetic state. A cascade of repair begins. Cortisol drops. The inflammatory markers that accumulate under chronic stress begin to resolve. The lymphatic system, the brain's own waste clearance system, becomes active, flushing out the metabolic debris that accumulates during waking hours, including the proteins implicated in neurodegeneration. Growth hormone is released predominantly during deep sleep. Cellular repair happens. The gut lining, one of the most rapidly regenerating tissues in the body, undergoes its restoration cycle. What I see clinically again and again is people who are doing everything right on paper, the supplements, the clean diet, the morning routine, but still not healing. And when I look closely, what is often missing is genuine, sustained, unguarded rest. Because here's the thing, the body cannot heal in a state of alarm. The nervous system cannot be in a sympathetic dominant state of fight, flight, or freeze and simultaneously run its repair processes. These are mutually exclusive states. Survival takes priority always. So when we are chronically stressed, chronically busy, chronically stimulated, we are, in a very literal physiological sense, deferring our healing. We are writing it down on a list that we never quite get to. Cortisol is the clearest signal of this. In short bursts, it's adaptive. It is what gets us through a crisis, a deadline, a difficult conversation. But cortisol was never designed to run at a low chronic hum for years at a time. When it does, it disrupts sleep architecture, suppresses immunity, elevates blood sugar, depletes the very nutrients such as magnesium, zinc, B vitamins that the nervous system needs to self-regulate. It becomes a loop. Stress depletes, and depletion makes it harder to rest. Inability to rest perpetuates stress. And breaking that loop requires something that feels almost countercultural. It requires choosing rest deliberately, unapologetically, because you've earned it by someone else's measure. Choosing rest, truly choosing it, not just collapsing into it when you have no other option, is an act of resistance in a culture that has monetized your attention and commodified your time. The writer and activist Tricia Hersey, who founded what she calls the Nap Ministry, speaks of rest as a form of liberation. She says rest is resistance. And while her work speaks specifically to communities whose labor have been exploited, I think the principle extends. Because all of us, in different ways, to different degrees, have internalized the idea that our worth is measured by our output, that we must justify our existence by being useful. And rest disrupts that. Rest says, I'm not only what I produce. My body is not a machine. My nervous system is not an inconvenience. I am a living, breathing, feeling human being, and I need to stop, not to become more productive later, though that may happen, but because stopping is in its own legitimate end. This is, I think, one of the quieter forms of self-respect, and it is the one that many of us were never really taught. So how do we begin? I don't think there is a 5-step protocol for this one. Rest is not something you optimize. It's something that you practice. It's something you learn to trust. But there are some things that I have found useful both personally and in guiding others. The first is noticing your resistance to it. When you sit down to do nothing, what arises? Is it anxiety, guilt, a sudden conviction that there are 17 things that you should be doing. That noticing is important. It is information. It tells you how deeply the culture of productivity has settled into your nervous system. The second is beginning with very small things. 5 minutes of sitting in sunlight without your phone, lying on the floor with your legs up the wall, eating and digesting a meal slowly without a screen, without a podcast, just the meal and your body. These small acts of presence are regulatory. The third is tending to sleep as sacred, not perfect sleep. Sleep is not always in our control, but the conditions for sleep, darkness, coolness, a nervous system that has been gently wound down over the course of an evening rather than overstimulated right up until the moment you close your eyes. And the fourth is giving yourself permission not to justify it. You do not need to be sick enough to rest. You do not need to have earned it. Rest is not a reward for exhaustion. Rest is a practice for life. Thank you for being here for this one. This episode felt important to say out loud, and I hope something in it landed for you wherever you are in your health journey. My book is still in the works, but episodes like this are part of how it comes alive. If something resonated with you today, I'd love to hear it. You can find me at apothecabyAnthea.com or across social media under Anthea Cluris, and your messages genuinely mean something to me. If this episode felt relevant to someone you love, please share it. And if you haven't already, a review or a follow-up helps more people find their way here. Until next time, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode of This Is How We Heal.
If this episode spoke to you, your healing journey doesn't have to end here. Join Anthea in her dedicated online community, the Staying Healthy Together Club, a space for real conversations and holistic health education with trusted resources. We'd love to see you there.